The sound of creek water running over smooth stones was the only thing Ethan Sawyer expected to hear that September afternoon in 1878. But the soft, broken sobbing of a woman cut through the air like a knife through his weathered heart. He had been riding along the banks of the tributary that fed into the White River in northwestern Arkansas, searching for nothing in particular except maybe a moment of peace from his loneliness, when he saw her sitting on a flat rock with her face buried in her hands. Ethan pulled his horse to a gentle stop and dismounted, his boots crunching on the rocky ground loud enough that she should have heard him, but she did not look up. Her shoulders shook with the force of her crying, and her dark hair had come loose from its pins to fall around her face like a curtain. She wore a simple cotton dress that had once been blue but now showed signs of hard travel and rough treatment, torn at the hem and stained with mud. "Miss," Ethan called out softly, not wanting to frighten her. "Are you hurt?" The woman's head snapped up, revealing a face streaked with tears and dirt. Her eyes were an unusual shade of green, like the color of new leaves in spring, and they widened with fear at the sight of him. She scrambled to her feet, backing away toward the creek, her body tensing as though preparing to run. "Please, I do not mean you any harm," Ethan said quickly, holding his hands up to show they were empty. "I heard you crying and wanted to make sure you were all right." She stared at him for a long moment, taking in his appearance. Ethan knew what she saw. A tall man of 26 years with sun-darkened skin, brown hair that needed cutting, and eyes that had seen too much hardship for his age. He wore the standard clothes of a working cowboy, his gun belt slung low on his hips, but he kept his hands well away from the weapon. "I am fine," she finally said, though her voice shook and her tears said otherwise. "Please just go on your way." "Cannot do that, miss," Ethan replied gently. "Not in good conscience, anyway. You are out here alone, crying by a creek in the middle of nowhere. Something is clearly wrong." She wrapped her arms around herself, looking away from him toward the flowing water. "What is wrong is none of your concern." "Maybe not," Ethan agreed, taking a careful step closer. "But I would be a poor excuse for a man if I rode away and left you here like this. At least tell me your name and where you are headed. Perhaps I can help you get there safely." Her laugh was bitter and hollow. "There is nowhere safe for me to go. Not anymore." Ethan felt something twist in his chest at the defeat in her voice. He had heard that tone before in the voices of people who had lost everything and saw no path forward. He had felt that way himself after the war, after he came home to find his family's farm burned and his parents dead from fever. "My name is Ethan Sawyer," he said, trying a different approach. "I work on the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of White River. I have been riding these trails for 3 years now, and I know them well. Whatever trouble you are in, I would like to help if I can." She turned back to look at him, studying his face with those remarkable green eyes. He could see her weighing her options, deciding whether to trust him or run. Something in his expression must have convinced her, because her shoulders sagged and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Lillian," she whispered. "Lillian Davis, and I am running from my husband." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Ethan felt his jaw tighten, understanding immediately what that likely meant. He had seen too many women with bruises they tried to hide, heard too many whispered stories of cruelty behind closed doors. "He hurt you," Ethan said, and it was not a question. Lillian nodded, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. "He has hurt me for the past 2 years, ever since our wedding day. I thought I could endure it. I thought maybe I could change him, make him love me the way I once believed he did. But 3 days ago, he nearly killed me." She pushed the sleeve of her dress up, revealing bruises that ringed her arm like dark bracelets. Ethan felt anger surge through him, hot and fierce, but he kept it from his face. She needed his help, not his rage. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked. "I do not know," Lillian said, pulling her sleeve back down. "He went into town to drink, same as he does every day. I waited until he was gone, then I took what few things I could carry and ran. That was yesterday morning. I have been walking ever since, staying off the main roads. I thought if I could get far enough away, maybe I could start over somewhere new, somewhere he would never find me." "How old are you, Lillian?" 22, she said. "Why does that matter?" "Just trying to understand your situation," Ethan replied. "Do you have family you could go to?" "Parents, siblings, anyone who might take you in?" She shook her head. "My parents died when I was 17. That is why I married Thomas in the first place. I had no money, no prospects. He seemed kind at first. He courted me properly, said all the right things. I had no idea what he would become after the wedding." Ethan nodded slowly, his mind working through possibilities. "White River is about 6 miles from here if you follow the creek downstream. There is a boarding house there run by a woman named Mrs. Fletcher. She is good people and she does not ask too many questions. I could take you there, make sure you get settled." "I have no money," Lillian said quietly. "I took what Thomas kept in the house, but it was only a few dollars, not enough for more than a night or two of lodging." "We will figure something out," Ethan said. He walked back to his horse and pulled his canteen from the saddle, then brought it to her. "Here, drink this. You must be thirsty after all that walking." Lillian took the canteen with trembling hands and drank deeply. When she handed it back, some of the desperate fear had left her eyes, replaced by cautious hope. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me. This is not your problem." Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the creek. "My sister was married to a man who hurt her," he finally said. "I did not know until it was too late. By the time I found out, she had already taken her own life to escape him. I swore after that I would never stand by and do nothing if I saw another woman in that kind of danger." "I am sorry," Lillian whispered. "About your sister." "Her name was Emma," Ethan said. "She was 2 years older than me and she was the kindest person I ever knew. She did not deserve what happened to her, and you do not deserve what has happened to you." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle rush of the creek and the occasional call of a bird. Then Lillian straightened her shoulders and looked at him directly. "I will accept your help," she said, "and I will find a way to repay you someday, I promise." "No need for that," Ethan said. He gestured toward his horse. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Lillian said. "My father had horses when I was growing up. I have not ridden much since he died, but I remember how." "Good, we will ride double to White River. It will be faster than walking, and I want to get you somewhere safe before dark." Ethan helped Lillian up onto his horse, then swung up behind her. She stiffened at first, uncomfortable with the closeness, but he kept his arms carefully positioned as he took up the reins, giving her space and making it clear he meant no threat. Slowly, she relaxed, and they started down the trail toward town. As they rode, Ethan found himself noticing things about her despite his best intentions to remain detached. The way she sat straight despite her exhaustion, refusing to slump in defeat. The delicate curve of her neck where her hair had fallen aside. The faint scent of lavender that clung to her despite her rough travels. He pushed those observations away, reminding himself that she was running from one man and surely wanted nothing to do with another. "Tell me about White River," Lillian said after a while, clearly trying to distract herself from whatever dark thoughts were circling in her mind. "It is a small town," Ethan replied. "Maybe 200 people when everyone is counted. There is a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and a few other businesses. The boarding house is on the east end. Folks mostly keep to themselves, which might suit your situation well. And you work on a ranch nearby, the Double R, owned by Robert Richards. He is a fair man, pays decent wages. I have been working there since I came to Arkansas 3 years ago. Before that, I was up in Missouri trying to make a go of my family's farm, but I could not manage it alone. Too many memories anyway. Where are you from originally? Tennessee, Ethan said. A small town you have never heard of. I left when I was 18 to fight in the war. By the time I got back, everything had changed. My parents had passed. Emma had married that bastard who hurt her, and the farm was falling apart. I tried for a while, but after Emma died, I just had to leave. Sold what was left and drifted west until I ended up here. I am sorry you went through all that, Lillian said softly. Life is hard, Ethan said, but we keep going anyway. No other choice, really. They rode in silence for a while longer, following the creek as it wound through stands of oak and hickory trees. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the path with light and shadow. In any other circumstances, it would have been a beautiful ride. As it was, Ethan could feel the tension in Lillian's body, the fear that her husband might appear at any moment. "What will you tell Mrs. Fletcher?" Lillian asked as the outskirts of White River came into view. "The truth, more or less," Ethan said. "That you are running from a dangerous situation and need a safe place to stay. She will understand. She has taken in women in similar circumstances before. And if Thomas comes looking for me, then we will deal with that when it happens," Ethan said firmly. "But you are not alone anymore, Lillian. You have help now." She turned her head slightly to look back at him, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes again. But this time they seemed to be tears of relief rather than despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know what I did to deserve meeting someone like you today, but thank you." Ethan felt something warm unfold in his chest, something he had not felt in a very long time. He told himself it was just satisfaction at helping someone in need, nothing more. But as they rode into White River and he helped Lillian down from the horse, his hands lingering perhaps a moment too long on her waist, he wondered if he was lying to himself. Mrs. Fletcher turned out to be exactly as Ethan had described. A sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Lillian's torn dress and bruised arms and ushered her inside without asking a single question. Ethan followed them into the boarding house, a well-maintained 2-story building with lace curtains in the windows. "The girl needs a room," Mrs. Fletcher said, her voice brooking no argument. "And she needs it for as long as necessary. Ethan, you vouch for her." "I do," Ethan said. "Good enough for me," Mrs. Fletcher said. She turned to Lillian. "What is your name, dear?" "Lillian Davis," she replied quietly. "Well, Miss Davis, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. The room is $2 a week, including breakfast and supper. If you need more time to gather funds, we can work something out." "I have a little money," Lillian said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a few crumpled bills, "but not much." Mrs. Fletcher waved her hand dismissively. "Keep your money for now. We will settle accounts later. Right now, you look like you could use a hot bath and a proper meal. Come with me, and I will get you situated." As Mrs. Fletcher led Lillian toward the stairs, the younger woman looked back at Ethan. "Will I see you again?" she asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice that made his heart clench. "I will come by tomorrow to check on you," Ethan promised. "Make sure you are settling in all right." She smiled then, just a small curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. Despite the dirt and tears and exhaustion, Ethan caught a glimpse of who she must have been before her husband broke her spirit. The smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, and it did something to him. reached into the lonely places he had been carrying around for years and touched them with warmth. He left the boarding house in something of a daze, collected his horse, and rode back toward the Double R Ranch. But all through the evening chores and supper with the other ranch hands, he could not stop thinking about Lillian Davis, about her green eyes and her brave determination to escape her terrible situation, about the way she had smiled at him before disappearing up those stairs. Ethan Sawyer had been alone for a long time. He had told himself he preferred it that way, that it was easier not to let anyone get too close. But meeting Lillian had stirred something in him he thought long dead. It was not just attraction, though he had to admit she was beautiful. It was something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits. She understood loss and pain and the struggle to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. She was broken, yes, but she was also strong, strong enough to run, to fight for her own survival. That night, lying on his bunk in the ranch house dormitory, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered what would happen next. He had promised to check on Lillian tomorrow, but he knew it was more than just a courtesy visit he was contemplating. He wanted to see her again. Wanted to know more about her. Wanted to be the one who helped her smile like that again. It was dangerous territory for a man who had sworn off emotional entanglements. But Ethan had learned that life rarely cared about the vows we make to ourselves. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Ethan finished his chores as quickly as possible. He told the ranch foreman, a gruff man named Bill, that he needed to go into town for supplies. It was not entirely a lie. He did pick up a few things at the general store before heading to Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. But his real purpose was to see Lillian, and he suspected Bill knew it from the knowing look the older man gave him. Mrs. Fletcher answered his knock with a smile. "I wondered when you would show up," she said. "She has been asking about you. How is she?" Ethan asked, removing his hat. "Better after a good night's sleep and some decent food," Mrs. Fletcher said. "But she is scared, Ethan. Jumped at every sound this morning, kept looking out the window like she expected someone to come bursting through the door. Whatever she ran from, it has her terrified. Her husband," Ethan said quietly. "She told me he nearly killed her." Mrs. Fletcher's mouth tightened into a thin line. "I figured it was something like that. Well, she is safe here. I have dealt with men like that before, and they do not frighten me. If he shows up looking for her, he will get a piece of my mind and the barrel of my shotgun in that order." Ethan could not help but smile at the fierce protectiveness in the older woman's voice. "Can I see her?" "She is in the parlor," Mrs. Fletcher said, stepping aside. "Go on in." Ethan found Lillian sitting by the window, wearing a different dress than yesterday. This one was a simple gray cotton that Mrs. Fletcher must have lent her, and her hair was clean and pinned up properly. She looked like a different person from the desperate, dirt-stained woman he had found crying by the creek, but when she turned at the sound of his footsteps, he saw the fear still lingering in her eyes. "Ethan," she said, and her face brightened. "Mrs. Fletcher said you would probably come by, but I was not sure." "I told you I would check on you," Ethan replied, crossing the room to stand near her chair. "How are you feeling?" "Safer," Lillian admitted. "Though every time I hear hoofbeats outside, I think it might be Thomas coming to drag me back." "He does not know where you are," Ethan reminded her gently. "And even if he did track you to White River, he would have to go through me and Mrs. Fletcher to get to you." "I cannot ask you to put yourself in danger for me," Lillian said. "You have already done so much." "You are not asking," Ethan said. "I am offering. There is a difference." She studied his face for a long moment, and Ethan wondered what she saw there. Whatever it was, it seemed to reassure her, because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Sit with me," she asked, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "Mrs. Fletcher has been kind, but I find myself wanting company, wanting to talk to someone who knows what I have been through. Ethan settled into the chair, his hat balanced on his knee. What would you like to talk about? Tell me more about yourself, Lillian said. You mentioned your sister yesterday and the war, but who are you beyond those tragedies? What do you do for pleasure? What makes you happy? It was such a simple question, but Ethan found himself struggling to answer. When had he last done something purely for pleasure? When had he last been truly happy? I like horses, he finally said. Always have since I was a boy. There is something peaceful about working with them, understanding how they think. They do not lie or pretend. If a horse trusts you, you have earned it. Lillian smiled. I used to love riding when I was young. My father had a mare named Daisy, and he would let me ride her around our property. I felt so free up on her back, like I could go anywhere and do anything. When is the last time you rode? Ethan asked. Not since my father died, Lillian said, her smile fading. Thomas said it was not proper for a married woman to go riding alone, and he was always too busy to accompany me. I think he just liked keeping me confined to the house where he could control me. Anger flared in Ethan again at the thought of someone trying to cage a spirited woman like Lillian. Would you like to ride again? The Double R has some gentle horses. I could bring one into town and we could go for a ride along the creek. Get you out of this house for a while. Lillian's eyes lit up. Could we really? I would love that, but I do not want to impose on your time. It is Saturday, Ethan said. I have the afternoon free. If you are willing, I can be back here in an hour with a horse for you. Yes, Lillian said eagerly. Yes, please, I would love that. True to his word, Ethan returned an hour later with 2 horses, his own and a gentle chestnut mare named Rosie. Mrs. Fletcher helped Lillian into a riding skirt, and soon they were heading out of town toward the open countryside. The transformation in Lillian was immediate. As soon as she was in the saddle, her entire demeanor changed. Her back straightened, her face relaxed, and that beautiful smile appeared again. They rode at an easy pace, following a trail that wound through meadows dotted with late-blooming wildflowers. This is wonderful, Lillian called over to him, her voice filled with joy. I had forgotten how much I loved this. You are a natural rider, Ethan observed. Your father taught you well. He was a good teacher, Lillian said, patient and kind. He believed girls should know how to do everything boys could do. My mother used to scold him for it, said he was making me too independent for my own good, but he would just laugh and say independence was the greatest gift he could give me. He sounds like he was a good man. He was, Lillian said softly. I miss him terribly. Sometimes I wonder what he would think of the choices I have made, of marrying Thomas, of staying with him as long as I did. I think he would be proud of you for finding the courage to leave, Ethan said. They rode for over an hour, talking about everything and nothing. Lillian told him about her childhood, about growing up on a small farm with parents who loved her. She talked about her mother's garden and her father's horses, about summer evenings catching fireflies and winter mornings with frost on the windows. She painted a picture of a happy life that had been torn apart by death and bad decisions. Ethan found himself sharing things he had not talked about in years. He told her about his time in the war, carefully leaving out the worst of it, but admitting how it had changed him. He talked about coming home to find everything gone and feeling like he no longer had a place in the world. He told her about Emma, about the guilt he still carried for not protecting her. You cannot blame yourself for what happened to your sister, Lillian said gently as they paused to let the horses drink from a stream. She made her own choices, just as I made mine. We cannot always protect the people we love from their own decisions. I know that in my head, Ethan admitted. But my heart has a harder time accepting it. I understand that, Lillian said. She looked at him with those remarkable green eyes. You have a good heart, Ethan Sawyer. Your sister was lucky to have a brother who cared so much." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went beyond words. Ethan felt it like a physical thing, a pull toward this woman he had only known for a day. It terrified him and exhilarated him in equal measure. They rowed back to White River as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When Ethan helped Lillian down from her horse outside the boarding house, his hands lingered on her waist again, and this time she did not pull away immediately. They stood there for a moment, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough to hear her slightly quickened breath. "Thank you for today," Lillian said softly. "It was exactly what I needed." "We can do it again," Ethan said, "whenever you like." "I would like that very much," she replied. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found excuses to visit White River almost daily. Sometimes he brought Lillian small gifts, a book from the general store, a ribbon for her hair, wildflowers he had picked on the trail. Other times they went riding together, exploring the countryside around White River and talking for hours. Gradually, Lillian began to relax, the constant fear in her eyes fading as days passed with no sign of her husband. Ethan found himself falling for her a little more each day. It was in the way she laughed at his stories, her whole face lighting up with genuine amusement. It was in her kindness toward Mrs. Fletcher and the other boarders, always offering to help with chores despite being a guest herself. It was in her quiet strength, the way she refused to let what had happened to her define who she was. For her part, Lillian seemed to be developing feelings for him as well. Ethan noticed how her face would brighten when he arrived, how she would lean toward him when they talked, how her hand would sometimes brush against his as they walked. But neither of them spoke of these growing feelings. Lillian was still legally married, still technically a woman fleeing her husband. It was complicated and messy, and neither of them wanted to rush into anything that might make the situation worse. Then, on a crisp October morning 4 weeks after Ethan had found Lillian by the creek, everything changed. Ethan was in town picking up supplies when he heard shouting coming from the direction of Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. His heart lurched in his chest, and he dropped the bag of flour he had been carrying and ran toward the sound. A man stood in the middle of the street outside the boarding house, his face red with rage. He was shorter than Ethan, stocky and muscular, with thinning hair and cold eyes. Mrs. Fletcher stood on her porch with her shotgun leveled at him, and Lillian was visible in the doorway behind her, her face pale with terror. "That is my wife," the man was yelling. "You have no right to keep her from me. Your wife is an adult woman who chose to leave you, Mrs. Fletcher shot back, her voice steady despite the weapon in her hands. "She has every right to decide where she wants to live, and she does not want to live with you." "She is my property," the man snarled. "I will have the law on you for keeping her here." "Thomas," Lillian's voice came from the doorway, shaking but determined. "Please just go. I am not coming back. I cannot." Thomas's head swiveled toward her, and the look on his face made Ethan's blood run cold. It was pure rage mixed with possessiveness, the look of a man who saw another person as something he owned rather than someone he loved. "You will come back with me right now," Thomas said, taking a step toward the porch. "Or I will drag you back myself." "I would not advise that," Ethan said, stepping into the street. His hand rested on his gun and his voice was low and dangerous. "The lady said she is not going with you." Thomas turned to look at Ethan, sizing him up. "Who the hell are you? A friend," Ethan replied simply. "And I am telling you to leave. Now." "This is between me and my wife," Thomas said. "It is none of your business." "I am making it my business," Ethan said, taking another step forward. He was aware of people gathering along the street, watching the confrontation. Lillian does not want to go with you. That makes it simple. Turn around and ride out of town. Thomas's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, and Ethan's reflexes kicked in from his years in the war. He had his own gun drawn before Thomas could clear leather, the barrel pointed steadily at the other man's chest. "Do not," Ethan said quietly. "I have killed men in the war, and I will do it again to protect her, but I would rather not have that blood on my hands. So I am going to give you a choice. You can leave White River right now and never come back, or you can try to draw on me and I will put a bullet in you. What is it going to be?" The street was silent except for the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Thomas looked from Ethan to Mrs. Fletcher with her shotgun to Lillian standing pale and terrified in the doorway. Whatever he saw in their faces must have convinced him he was outnumbered, because his hand slowly moved away from his gun. "This is not over," Thomas said, his voice venomous. "She is still my wife under the law. I will find a way to get her back." "No, you will not," came a new voice. The sheriff, a weathered man named Dan Porter, had appeared from the crowd. "I heard the whole thing, Davies. You came here threatening violence, and Mr. Sawyer here was well within his rights to defend the lady. Now I suggest you take his advice and leave town before I arrest you for disturbing the peace." Thomas's face went even redder, but he was smart enough not to argue with the sheriff. He shot one last poisonous look at Lillian, then turned and stalked toward his horse. Within moments, he had mounted and ridden out of town at a gallop, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Ethan holstered his gun and immediately went to the boarding house porch. Lillian had collapsed onto the steps, shaking like a leaf. He sat down beside her and carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, put his arm around her shoulders. She immediately turned into him, burying her face against his chest and sobbing. "It is all right," Ethan murmured, holding her close. "He is gone. You are safe." "He found me," Lillian gasped between sobs. "I thought I had gotten far enough away, but he found me." "And now he knows you have people protecting you," Ethan said. "He knows it will not be easy to take you. That might be enough to make him give up." But even as he said it, Ethan knew it was probably not true. Men like Thomas Davies did not give up easily, especially when their pride was wounded. He would be back one way or another. Sheriff Porter approached them, removing his hat. "Miss Davis, I am sorry you had to go through that. For what it is worth, I have seen your husband's type before. Bullies who think a wedding ring gives them ownership of another person. The law might be on his side in some places, but in my town, I protect people who need protecting. He comes back here causing trouble, and I will arrest him. You have my word on that." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lillian whispered. "Mr. Sawyer," the sheriff added, turning to Ethan. "That was well handled. You kept your head and did not escalate things more than necessary. I appreciate that." Ethan nodded, but his attention was focused on Lillian, who was still trembling in his arms. After the sheriff left and the crowd dispersed, Mrs. Fletcher came down to help Lillian inside. Ethan followed, not wanting to leave her alone. They settled Lillian in the parlor with a cup of tea. Mrs. Fletcher disappeared to give them privacy, and Ethan pulled his chair close to Lillian's. "I am scared," Lillian admitted, her hands wrapped tightly around the teacup. "What if he comes back in the middle of the night? What if he finds a way to take me when no one is watching?" "Then we will make sure someone is always watching," Ethan said. "I can sleep on the porch here at night if it would make you feel safer, and during the day you should not go anywhere alone." "I cannot ask you to do that," Lillian protested. "You have your own life, your job at the ranch." "I can talk to Mr. Richards," Ethan said. "Explain the situation. He is a reasonable man. I think he will understand." Lillian set down her teacup and reached out to take Ethan's hand. Her fingers were small and cold in his, but her grip was firm. "Why are you doing all this for me? We barely know each other." Ethan looked down at their joined hands, then up into her green eyes. "I think you know why," he said softly. "Tell me anyway," Lillian whispered. "I need to hear it." "Because I care about you," Ethan said, his thumb stroking gently over her knuckles. "Because in the past month, you have become the most important person in my life. Because when I found you crying by that creek, something in me recognized something in you. We are both broken, Lillian. Both trying to find our way forward after terrible things have happened. But maybe we could find that way together." Tears filled Lillian's eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I have tried to tell myself it is too soon, that I am still married to Thomas, that I have no right to have these feelings. But I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like myself again. You make me want to believe that happiness is still possible." "It is possible," Ethan said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "We will make it possible together." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, speaking in soft voices about their hopes and fears. Outside, the sun moved across the sky, but neither of them noticed. They were too caught up in each other, in the fragile new connection growing between them. That night, true to his word, Ethan made a bedroll on Mrs. Fletcher's porch. It was uncomfortable and cold, but he did not care. Knowing he was there to protect Lillian made it worthwhile. He woke several times during the night, listening to the sounds of the town, alert for any sign of Thomas returning. But the night passed quietly, and when morning came, Mrs. Fletcher brought him coffee and thanked him for standing guard. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Ethan spent his mornings working at the Double R Ranch, then came to White River in the afternoons to be with Lillian. In the evenings, he slept on the boarding house porch. Mr. Richards, the ranch owner, proved to be as understanding as Ethan had hoped, even offering to pay Ethan his full wages despite the reduced hours. "A man protecting a lady is doing God's work," Mr. Richards had said. "I will not punish you for that." Ethan and Lillian spent long hours together, their relationship deepening with each passing day. They took walks around town, careful never to go too far from help. They sat in the parlor and talked about everything under the sun. They shared meals at the boarding house, their knees touching under the table in a secret intimacy that made Lillian blush. Slowly, Lillian began to open up about the full extent of Thomas's abuse. The beatings had been bad enough, but the emotional cruelty had been worse in some ways. He had isolated her from the few friends she had made, convinced her that she was worthless and stupid, told her that no one else would ever want her. He had controlled every aspect of her life, from what she wore to what she ate to when she could leave the house. "I started to believe him," Lillian confessed one afternoon as they sat by the creek where Ethan had first found her. "I started to think maybe I deserved it, that maybe there was something wrong with me that made him act that way." "There is nothing wrong with you," Ethan said fiercely. "What he did was not your fault. No one deserves to be treated like that ever." "I know that now," Lillian said. "You have helped me see it. You treat me with such kindness and respect. You listen when I talk, value my opinions. You make me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Ethan said. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "You matter very much, to me." Lillian leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Ethan," she whispered. "Yes, I know this is complicated. I know I am still legally married. But I need you to know that in my heart I am not his wife anymore. I have not been for a long time. My heart belongs to you now if you want it." Ethan felt something swell in his chest, something warm and bright and terrifying. "I want it," he said. God help me, I want it more than I have wanted anything in years. He leaned forward, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. It was soft and gentle, a question more than a demand. Lillian's lips were warm beneath his, and after a moment of surprise, she kissed him back. Her hand came up to rest on his chest over his heart, and Ethan thought he might die from the sweetness of it. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Lillian's cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were bright with something that looked like joy. "I've been wanting you to do that for weeks," she admitted. "Why did you not say something?" Ethan asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Because I was afraid," Lillian said. "Afraid that you did not feel the same way. Afraid that I was being foolish, falling for the first kind man I met after leaving Thomas. But it is not just because you are kind, Ethan. It is because of who you are, your strength and your gentleness. The way you see me, really see me, not just as someone who needs rescuing, but as a whole person." "I do see you," Ethan said. "I see your courage and your resilience. I see how hard you are working to rebuild your life. I see a woman I am falling in love with." Lillian's breath caught. "You love me." "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you by this creek," Ethan admitted. "When you smiled at me that first day, despite everything you had been through, something in me just knew. You were the one I had been waiting for." "I love you too," Lillian whispered. She kissed him again, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it. This time it was a promise. They spent the rest of the afternoon by the creek, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that felt suddenly possible. Lillian would need to get a divorce from Thomas, which would be difficult but not impossible. There were grounds for it, with his abuse and abandonment. It would take time and money, but Ethan was prepared to help with both. "I want to marry you," Ethan said as the sun began to set. "When you are free, when it is legal and proper, I want to make you my wife, if you will have me." "Yes," Lillian said, her smile brighter than the fading sunlight. "Yes, when I am free, I will marry you. I will be proud to be your wife." They rode back to White River hand in hand, their horses walking side by side. For the first time since Ethan had found her, Lillian looked truly happy. The fear was still there, lurking in the background, but it was overshadowed by hope. That hope was tested 3 days later when Thomas returned. This time, he was smarter about it. He did not ride into town in broad daylight making threats. Instead, he waited until late evening when the streets were mostly empty and Ethan was on his usual post on the boarding house porch. Thomas approached quietly, on foot, having left his horse somewhere outside of town. Ethan saw him coming and immediately stood up, his hand going to his gun. "I told you to stay away," he called out. "I just want to talk to her," Thomas said, his hands raised to show they were empty. "That is all, just 5 minutes man to man to see if we can work this out." "There is nothing to work out," Ethan replied. "She is not going back to you." "Let her tell me that herself," Thomas said. "Let me hear it from her own lips and I will leave peacefully. I give you my word." Ethan hesitated. He did not trust Thomas for a second, but he also knew that Lillian might need this closure. Might need to tell her husband directly that she was done with him. "Wait here," Ethan said. "I will ask her if she wants to see you." He went inside and found Lillian in the parlor with Mrs. Fletcher, both of them working on mending. When he told them Thomas was outside asking to talk, all the color drained from Lillian's face. "Do not make me see him," she pleaded. "Please, Ethan." "You do not have to," Ethan assured her, "but he says he will leave peacefully if you tell him yourself that it is over." "I thought maybe you would want that chance." Lillian took a deep breath, then nodded. "All right, but I want you there with me. I am not facing him alone." "I will be right beside you," Ethan promised. They went out onto the porch together, Lillian clinging to Ethan's arm. Mrs. Fletcher followed with her shotgun, positioning herself in the doorway. Thomas stood in the street, illuminated by the light spilling from the boarding house windows. "Thomas," Lillian said, her voice shaking but clear, "I am not coming back to you, ever. What we had is over. I want a divorce." "You do not mean that," Thomas said, taking a step closer. "You are just confused. That man has been filling your head with lies about me." "No," Lillian said firmly. "Ethan has not said anything that is not true. You hurt me, Thomas. You beat me and belittled me and tried to destroy who I am. I stayed as long as I could, but I cannot anymore. I will not. I want a divorce, and I am prepared to go to court to get it." Thomas's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled. "After everything I did for you, I gave you a home, food, clothes. I made you my wife when no one else would have you. You made my life hell," Lillian shot back, and Ethan felt a surge of pride at her courage. "You do not own me, Thomas. I am leaving you, and there is nothing you can do about it." "We will see about that," Thomas said. His hand moved toward his back, and Ethan saw the glint of metal. "Gun!" Ethan shouted, pushing Lillian behind him and drawing his own weapon in one smooth motion. But Thomas was not going for a gun. He had pulled a knife, and before Ethan could react, he had lunged forward, covering the distance between them with frightening speed. The blade caught the lamplight as it arced toward Ethan's chest. Ethan fired instinctively, his military training taking over. The shot was loud in the quiet evening, and Thomas stumbled backward, the knife falling from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt with an expression of surprise, then crumpled to the ground. For a moment, everything was still. Then Lillian was crying and Mrs. Fletcher was shouting for the sheriff, and Ethan was standing there with his smoking gun, staring at the man he had just killed. Sheriff Porter arrived quickly, along with half the town. He examined Thomas's body, noting the knife lying nearby and the defensive nature of Ethan's position on the porch. Several witnesses had seen the confrontation from their windows and corroborated that Thomas had attacked first. "Clear case of self-defense," the sheriff declared. "He came at you with a deadly weapon while you were protecting the lady. You had every right to shoot. No charges will be filed." Ethan nodded numbly, still processing what had happened. He had killed men during the war, but that had been different. This was up close and personal, and despite everything Thomas had done, Ethan felt no satisfaction in taking his life. Lillian was beside him, her hand clutching his arm. "Are you all right?" she asked, her face pale. "Are you?" Ethan countered. "I do not know," Lillian admitted. "He was my husband. I hated him, feared him, but I never wanted him dead. I just wanted to be free of him." "You are free now," Mrs. Fletcher said gently, putting her arm around Lillian's shoulders. "For better or worse, you are free." The next few days passed in a blur. The town undertook the grim task of burying Thomas Davies, and Lillian, as his widow, had to handle the legal matters. It turned out Thomas had owned a small piece of land about 20 miles from White River, along with some livestock and a bit of money in the bank. All of it passed to Lillian as his sole heir. "I do not want any of it," Lillian told Ethan as they sat in the lawyer's office. "I just want to forget he ever existed." "Take what is rightfully yours," Ethan advised. "Sell the land and the livestock. Use the money to start fresh. He owes you that much at least, after everything he put you through." In the end, that was what Lillian did. The land sold quickly to a neighbor who had been wanting to expand his holdings, and the livestock went for a fair price. Combined with what was in Thomas's bank account, Lillian found herself with nearly $500, more money than she had ever had in her life. "This changes things," she told Ethan one evening as they walked along the creek in the fading light. Winter was coming on, and there was a chill in the air that spoke of snow to come. "I can support myself now. I do not need anyone to take care of me." I never wanted to take care of you, Ethan said. I wanted to be with you. There is a difference. Lillian smiled and squeezed his hand. I know. And I want to be with you too. But now I am coming to you as an equal, not as someone who needs rescuing. You were always my equal, Ethan said. Being in a bad situation does not make you less than anyone else. You truly believe that, do not you? Lillian marveled. You see me as strong even when I feel weak. You are the strongest person I know, Ethan said. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Lillian Davis, I know it has not been long. I know we have been through more in these few months than some people go through in a lifetime, but I meant what I said before. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. What do you say? Yes, Lillian said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you, Ethan Sawyer. I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else. Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small sapphire stone. It was my mother's, he explained. One of the few things I kept from home. I have been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment to ask you. Lillian's eyes filled with tears as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and she held her hand up to catch the last rays of sunlight, watching the sapphire sparkle. It is beautiful, she whispered. I will treasure it always. They were married in White River's small church on a cold December morning, with Mrs. Fletcher and Sheriff Porter standing as witnesses. Lillian wore a new dress she had made herself, a deep blue that matched her ring and brought out the green of her eyes. Ethan wore his best clothes, his hair freshly cut and his boots polished. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Ethan he could kiss his bride, Ethan gathered Lillian into his arms and kissed her with all the love and promise he had been holding inside. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this. I could never regret you, Lillian replied. You saved me, Ethan, not just from Thomas, but from myself. You showed me I was worth saving. You saved me too, Ethan said. I was so lonely before I found you, so lost. You gave me a reason to hope again. They moved into a small house on the outskirts of White River that Lillian purchased with part of her inheritance. It was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor with large windows that let in the winter sunlight. Ethan continued working at the Double R Ranch, and Lillian took in sewing work from the women in town, her skill with a needle becoming well known. Their first months of marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. They learned each other's habits and quirks, the way all newlyweds do. Ethan learned that Lillian hummed while she sewed and that she liked her coffee with extra sugar. Lillian learned that Ethan talked in his sleep sometimes, reliving battles from the war, and that he needed to be outside working with his hands to feel truly content. They also learned about intimacy and trust. Lillian's experiences with Thomas had left her wary of physical affection, but Ethan was patient and gentle, never pushing, always letting her set the pace. Slowly, night by night, she began to relax in his arms, to understand that love and desire did not have to come with fear and pain. "Thank you," she whispered to him one night as they lay tangled together in their bed, "for being so patient with me." "You are worth all the patience in the world," Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We have the rest of our lives to figure this out together." Spring came to Arkansas with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. Lillian discovered she was pregnant in late April, and the joy on her face when she told Ethan was something he knew he would remember forever. "A baby," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. I can hardly believe it." "We are going to be parents," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Lillian admitted. but also so happy. I always wanted children, but with Thomas, I prayed it would never happen. I could not bear the thought of bringing a child into that situation. But with you, I cannot wait. I know our child will be loved and safe and happy." "The happiest child in Arkansas," Ethan agreed. Lillian's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Her belly grew round, and Ethan marveled at the changes in her body, the way she seemed to glow with new life. They spent long evenings discussing names and making plans for the nursery, painting the second bedroom a cheerful yellow, and building a cradle from oak wood. The baby came on a cold January night, arriving 3 weeks earlier than expected. Mrs. Fletcher served as midwife, her steady presence calming Lillian through the long hours of labor. Ethan paced the parlor, jumping at every sound from the bedroom, until finally he heard the thin wail of an infant. Mrs. Fletcher emerged with a tired smile. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy with a good set of lungs, and Lillian came through just fine." Ethan rushed into the bedroom to find his wife propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. When Lillian pulled the blanket back, Ethan got his first look at his son and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. The baby had dark hair like his, but Lillian's delicate features. His eyes were squinted shut, and his tiny fists waved in the air as he made soft mewling sounds. "He is perfect," Ethan breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are amazing. You did this." "We did this," Lillian corrected, placing the baby in Ethan's arms. "Say hello to your son." Ethan held his son with the careful reverence of a man holding something infinitely precious. The baby settled immediately against his chest, as though recognizing his father's voice and heartbeat. "Hello, little one," Ethan whispered. "Welcome to the world. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." They named him Emmett, after Ethan's sister Emma, and after being strong. Emmett Sawyer would carry his aunt's memory forward while making his own mark on the world. As Ethan watched his wife and son sleeping peacefully later that night, he thought about how far they had both come from that day by the creek. Lillian had been broken then, running from a nightmare with no hope for the future. Ethan had been lonely and adrift, going through the motions of life without really living. But they had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found themselves again. They had built something beautiful from their shared pain, a love that was all the stronger for having been forged in hardship. Emmett grew quickly, as babies do. He was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, and he brought endless joy to his parents. Ethan would come home from the ranch each evening to find Lillian and Emmett waiting for him, and his heart would swell with gratitude for this life they had built together. When Emmett was 6 months old, Ethan came home one day with news. "Mr. Richards is looking to sell the Double R," he told Lillian. "He wants to move back east to be near his daughter. He offered to sell it to me first, as I have been his foreman for the past year." "Can we afford it?" Lillian asked, excitement dawning in her eyes. "Not outright," Ethan admitted. "But with what we have saved and what you have left from selling Thomas's land, we could make a good down payment. The bank would likely loan us the rest, given my reputation and the ranch's profitability." "Then we should do it," Lillian said immediately. "Imagine, Ethan, our own ranch, our own land, a legacy for Emmett and any other children we might have." So Ethan Sawyer became a ranch owner at the age of 28, taking over the Double R and all its operations. It was hard work, harder than anything he had done before, but he thrived on it. Lillian proved to be a natural partner, keeping the books and managing the household with the same skills she applied to everything else. 2 years after Emmett's birth, Lillian gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, after Ethan's beloved sister. Emma had her mother's green eyes and a quiet, thoughtful disposition that balanced Emmett's boisterous energy. Then came another son, Samuel, strong and healthy and as loud as his older brother. The Sawyer family grew and flourished along with their ranch. Ethan proved to be a fair and generous employer, and the Double R became known throughout Arkansas as a good place to work. Lillian's sewing business evolved into a small store in White River, where she sold not just her own work, but also goods on consignment from other local craftswomen. Years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Ethan taught Emmett to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and little Emma proved to have her father's gift with horses, despite being half the age of most ranch hands when she started helping in the stables. Samuel showed an interest in books and numbers, spending hours poring over the ranch accounts with his mother. On a warm September evening in 1889, 11 years after Ethan had found Lillian crying by the creek, they stood together on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over their land. The children were inside doing their lessons, and for a rare moment, Ethan and Lillian were alone. "Do you ever think about that day?" Lillian asked, leaning against her husband. "The day you found me." "Often," Ethan admitted, wrapping his arm around her waist. "I think about how close I came to riding a different path that day. I almost went north instead of following the creek. If I had, I never would have found you." "I think you would have," Lillian said. "Maybe not that day, but someday. I believe we were meant to find each other one way or another." "My life truly began that day," Ethan said. "Everything before it was just preparation, just surviving until I could meet you." "You saved my life," Lillian said softly. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me back my freedom, my dignity, my hope. You taught me what real love looks like. And you healed me," Ethan replied. "I did not even realize how broken I was until I saw your smile that first day. It was like sunshine breaking through clouds. It made me want to be better, to build something good and lasting." Lillian turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. There were fine lines around her eyes now and threads of silver in her dark hair, but to Ethan she was more beautiful than ever. She was the mother of his children, the partner in all his endeavors, the love of his life. "I love you," she said, as she had said countless times over the years. But it never got old, never lost its power to move him. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Two people who had found each other in the darkest moments of their lives and built something radiant from that darkness. Inside, they could hear Emmett helping Emma with her arithmetic, while Samuel read aloud from a book. The sounds of their family, the life they had created together. It was everything Ethan had never dared to hope for, and more than he could have imagined. As the years continued to roll by, the Sawyer Ranch became a fixture in the White River community. Ethan and Lillian were respected not just for their business success, but for their kindness and generosity. They often took in young cowboys down on their luck, giving them work and a place to stay. Lillian became known for her charity work, organizing donations for families in need and teaching sewing classes to young women who needed a trade. Their children grew into fine young adults. Emmett proved to have his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Ethan's hair turned gray. Emma married a neighboring rancher's son, a kind young man who loved her fierce spirit and respected her intelligence. Samuel attended university back east, studying law, but he always came home for the summers to help on the ranch and spend time with his family through it all. Ethan and Lillian remained devoted to each other. They never forgot where they had come from, the pain that had brought them together. It made them appreciate the good in their lives all the more, never taking for granted the simple blessing of waking up next to someone who loved them completely. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Lillian back to the creek where they had first met. It was a warm May afternoon, and the wildflowers were in full bloom, just as they had been that September day so many years before. "You remember what you said to me when I asked if you were hurt?" Ethan asked as they stood by the water. "I said I was fine," Lillian replied with a smile. "Which was a terrible lie. And then you said there was nowhere safe for you to go," Ethan continued. "That broke my heart, still does, thinking about how lost you were." "But I was not lost for long," Lillian said, "because you found me. You gave me a safe place to go. You gave me a home, not just a house, but a real home filled with love." "We gave each other that," Ethan said. "I was just as lost as you were, Lillian. I was going through the motions, working and sleeping and waking up to do it all again. I had forgotten how to really live. You reminded me." "We saved each other," Lillian agreed. She pulled him down to sit beside her on the same flat rock where she had been crying that long-ago day. "And we built a beautiful life together. 3 amazing children, a successful ranch, a community that respects us. But the best part, the part I treasure most, is you, having you beside me every day, knowing that I am loved completely, exactly as I am." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Ethan said. "Finding you was the greatest gift of my life." They sat by the creek for hours, talking and reminiscing, their hands clasped together. The sun was setting when they finally rose to head home, and Lillian paused to look back at the creek one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Ethan asked. "For stopping that day," Lillian said. "For not riding past. For caring enough about a stranger's tears to get involved. You changed the entire course of my life with that one decision." "I would make that decision 1,000 times over," Ethan said. "Every time without hesitation." As they rode home together on Ethan's horse, just as they had that first day, Lillian leaned back against her husband's chest and felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not been easy. She had known pain and fear and despair, but she had also known great love and joy and purpose. The hard times had made her stronger, and the good times all the sweeter for having been earned. More years passed, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that mark any long life. Ethan and Lillian became grandparents, delighting in Emmett's children and later Emma's. Samuel eventually returned to White River with a wife of his own, opening a law practice in town and working to improve conditions for people in situations like the one Lillian had once found herself in. Through it all, Ethan and Lillian remained each other's greatest support and deepest love. They aged together gracefully, their hair turning white and their steps slowing, but the bond between them only growing stronger. They could often be found sitting on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, just as they had done for decades. On a quiet spring morning in 1905, Ethan Sawyer passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 53, with Lillian holding his hand. He had lived a good life, a full life, surrounded by love and accomplishment. But more than any of his material successes, his greatest achievement had been the family he built and the love he shared with his wife. Lillian grieved deeply for the man who had saved her and loved her so completely. But she did not despair. She had learned long ago that life goes on, that we honor those we love by continuing to live fully and well. She continued running the ranch with Emmett's help, continued her charity work, continued to be a pillar of the White River community. She lived another 15 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of their grandfather and the love they had shared. She told them about being found by the creek, about a lonely cowboy who had stopped to help a crying woman and ended up changing both their lives forever. When Lillian Davis Sawyer finally passed away in the spring of 1920 at the age of 62, the entire town of White River turned out for her funeral. She was remembered as a woman of strength and grace, someone who had overcome terrible circumstances to build a life of meaning and purpose. She was remembered for her kindness, her generosity, her unwavering love for her family, but most of all, she was remembered as one half of a great love story. The story of two broken people who found each other when they needed it most, who healed each other's wounds and built something beautiful together. It was a story that would be told and retold through the generations, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, love can find us and transform everything. The Sawyer Ranch continued to operate for many more decades, eventually passing to Emmett's children and then to theirs. The small house on the outskirts of White River, where Ethan and Lillian had started their married life, was preserved by the family, a monument to where it all began. And the creek where Ethan had found Lillian became a local landmark, a place where couples would go to remember that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. Years turned to decades, and decades to centuries, but the story endured. The story of a lonely cowboy and a woman crying by a creek. The story of how her tears broke his heart and her smile healed his soul. The story of two people who saved each other and built a legacy of love that outlasted them both. In the end, that is what matters most. Not the pain we endure or the challenges we face, but the love we share and the lives we touch. Ethan and Lillian Sawyer understood that truth deeply, lived it fully, and left behind a family and a community forever shaped by their example. Their story was one of heartbreak and healing, of loss and redemption, of darkness and light. But above all, it was a story of love, real, deep, transformative love, the kind of love that changes everything, the kind of love that lasts forever. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Ethan and Lillian were together again, whole and healed and happy, their hands clasped just as they had been on that first ride into White River. Together for eternity, just as they had been meant to be from the moment he heard her crying by the creek and chose to stop. That choice, that single decision to care about a stranger's pain, had rippled out across time and generations, touching countless lives and creating ripples that would never fully fade. It was a testament to the power of compassion, to the importance of choosing kindness even when it would be easier to look away. Ethan Sawyer had been a good man who became great through love. Lillian Davis had been a broken woman who became whole through trust and partnership. Together, they proved that it is never too late to start over, never too late to find happiness, never too late to build the life you were always meant to live. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still bore the Sawyer name, in the stories told around dinner tables, and in the quiet moments when couples visited that creek and remembered what love really means. It lived on in every act of kindness inspired by their example, every person who chose to stop and help someone in need rather than riding past. The Wild West was a hard place, full of danger and difficulty. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to define the future. Ethan and Lillian embodied that spirit of possibility, proving that even in the roughest circumstances, love and hope could flourish. Their story had a happy ending, the kind that is earned through hard work and dedication, and choosing each other every single day. They faced challenges and overcame them together. They built something lasting and beautiful from the rubble of their broken pasts. And when their time on earth was done, They left behind a legacy that would inspire others for generations to come. That September afternoon in 1878, when Ethan found Lillian by the creek, marked the beginning of something extraordinary. Neither of them could have known it at the time, but that chance meeting would change everything. It would create a family, build a legacy, and prove that love really can heal all wounds. And so their story ends as it began, with a creek running over smooth stones and two souls finding each other in the wilderness. But this time, instead of tears and loneliness, there is joy and completeness. This time, instead of a beginning, there is a perfect, peaceful ending. The kind of ending that feels less like an ending and more like a promise fulfilled. Ethan and Lillian Sawyer lived, loved, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for? What greater legacy could anyone leave? Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. And in that completeness, in that eternal love, they found the happy ending they both deserved.